was chosen by God, right? This was not his decision. It was not even Samuel's decision for David to succeed Saul as king. And I'm sure many of you remember and know all the details surrounding Saul. That he was not doing things the way God wanted him to do, and when you're outside of God's will, there's consequences that come for that, right? And so he suffered those consequences. And so it was after that, and Saul began to kind of lose his mind after Samuel came to him and told him that the Lord's going to remove his spirit from you. He's done with you. You're done. You're not going to be, you're no longer going to be king. And so nobody knew when Samuel came to the house of Jesse. You know the story that Jesse showed him all of his big strong sons, and David left David out tending to the sheep, and he called or asked if he had any more, and he said yeah. And so Samuel said, this is him. And so David would be chosen by God through he'd use Samuel to let them know. And so David would eventually come in and play the harp in Saul's court. And he would, during that time, there's some differing of opinions on things that happened. But again, all this is my personal opinion based on Scripture and the way the Scripture reads. David came into the courts of Saul already knowing. Now, I want you to think about that. Already knowing that he has been informed that he will be the next king. And so he is called to come into Saul's courts to be a musician. And so he comes and does what he's supposed to do, and he would go back and forth to tend to his father's sheep from the palace and Bethlehem and Jerusalem, not a whole, not a lot of distance between the two, so it wasn't a great journey that he would take. But eventually David would go on, and as he was sent to check on his brothers, take them some food, he would slay Goliath. And he would then be brought back into, continue coming to Saul's courts, given new roles. Obviously, Saul knew who he was from being there, and he would take some different roles there in Saul's, under Saul's authority. And then one day things would change, right? Isn't it amazing how, which obviously Saul was losing his mind. But David didn't ask for any of that. And yet, David's going to have to endure. Now, mind you, this is something I think we look at and we lose sight of. Yes, David would suffer things later on that he brought into his own life, right? He would, by his own sin, he would suffer some things later on. But know this, that none of this early stuff, David had not really done anything wrong. That there's anything accounted of. David is just following what he's told to do, and he's even really being very, I would guess you would say cordial to Saul. There would come a point, you would think, where, man would want to step up and say, hey, you don't know this, but I'm taking your job, and Samuel told me so. But he didn't do that. David was always, very, very good with being obedient. Does anybody know, once Saul turned on David, do you know how long David fled from Saul? An estimate? No. No. Between 7 and 13 years is what it's believed. That there's no official timeline given, no official number in Scripture. You won't find that, just based on historical evidence and things, that it's believed somewhere between, on the low end, 7 years and the high end, 13 years. That David would flee from Saul. So I said all that I said earlier about David not having done anything wrong. That's a long time to have to live that kind of life when you hadn't done anything. You didn't ask for it. It was given to you. And so, Saul became. Anybody remember what it was that made Saul jealous? What the straw was that broke the camel's back? Yeah. 1 Samuel chapter 18. They were singing and praising, really, David, and in verse 7 it says, "And the women answered one another as they played, and said, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s." And so Saul, a man of war, really, that's a slap in the face to him. And so that would end up being kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And so, as we get into this is going to cover a lot. I may not read every verse captured in all of this, but I will definitely give you the scripture reference so that you can, if you're taking notes, making notes, you can kind of write it down as you follow this journey that David is going to go on. And so we start in 1 Samuel chapter 18, which is where I just referenced. And we'll begin in verse number 6. It says, "And it came to pass, as they came when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistines, the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing, to meet King Saul with tabrets, with joy, and with instruments of music. And the women answered one another as they played, and said, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him. And he said, They have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have more but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day and forward. And it came to pass on the morrow that the evil spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of the house. And David played with his hand at the other times, and there was a javelin in Saul's hand. And Saul cast the javelin, for he said, I will smite David even to the wall with it. And David avoided out of his presence twice. And Saul was afraid of David, because the Lord was with him, and was departed from Saul. And there Saul removed him from him, and made him his captain over 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people, and David behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. Wherefore when Saul saw that he behaved himself wisely, he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, because he went out and came in before them. And then if you jump over to chapter 19, so before we get to chapter 19, just to kind of give you, Saul, again, in this whole losing his mind, he's very paranoid. And, paranoia is a scary thing, and causes people to do crazy things. And this is where Saul is. He's paranoid, and he's only paranoid of losing his power. You would want to think that, just obviously Saul is not as dumb as would think he is, because which is double-sided to me whenever I read this, that Saul is afraid of David. Now, Saul is not a little fella. He's a skilled warrior. And while David has gone out and been part of battles and all of this, you know, if you were to put the two side by side, you would think, why would a man like that be afraid of David? Well, he says why he's afraid of David. What did he say? That's right, because the Lord was with David. That's where I look at it and I think, man, Saul, you're not really as dumb as I think you are. So why wouldn't you just step down and say, you know what, I don't want this? But again, there's a little another, you know, we talked about paranoia. There's another P word that falls in there. Pride. He was not going to let somebody else take his throne. He was not, especially some young kid that you know, he brought him in to be a musician in his chambers, and so, you know, understand where this is at. That while Saul is scared of David, he wants him dead on one hand, but on the other hand, I love the fact that the Bible points out that David behaved himself wisely. And that goes back to what I was telling you earlier, that David's not doing anything reckless. David's not walking around with his chest poked out and bragging that he's going to, because at this point, guess what? They still really don't know. But Saul's starting to put pieces of the puzzle together, and with that, it's only going to get worse. And so when we flip over to chapter 19 and you look at verse number 8, and there was war again. And David went out and fought with the Philistines and slew them with a great slaughter. And they fled from him. And the evil spirit from the Lord was upon Saul as he sat in his house with his javelin in his hand. And David played with his hand. And Saul sought to smite David even to the wall with the javelin. But he slipped away out of Saul's presence, and he smote the javelin into the wall. And David fled and escaped that night. So, David, you know, this is taking place, and you can go ahead and go to the next, to the first map, Brother Adam. So this is taking place in Gibeah, and I know it's not a great map. It's probably not very visible to you, but this is up here. This is Gibeah. This is where Saul, his headquarters, if you will, and military base, where David initially served. And you know, so now Saul he carries out what he wanted to do earlier, right? He just attempted to kill David, didn't he? Twice. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm David, I'm not giving him a second opportunity. I'm getting out of Dodge after the first one. You know, so all of David's success and the love of the people that they had for David, it really it just played on Saul, and it ignited that intense fear and insecurity, and so from Gibeah, Saul repeatedly attempted to kill David, hurled the spear at him, and this is where, in Gibeah, this is where David's life as a fugitive begins. So for the next, again, somewhere between 7 and 13 years, David's going to be a fugitive. For what? For absolutely nothing other than the fact that the king wants to kill him. And it really, it gets just a little more wild as it goes on. But continue in chapter 19, and you go down to verse number 18. Excuse me. Chapter 19, verse 18. We'll read down through the end of the chapter. So David fled and escaped, and came to Samuel to Ramah, and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and dwelt in Naioth. And it was told Saul, saying, Behold, David is at Naioth in Ramah. And Saul sent messengers to take David, and when they saw the company of the prophets prophesying, and Samuel standing as an appointed over them, the Spirit of God was upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. And when it was told Saul, he sent other messengers, and they prophesied likewise. And Saul sent messengers again the third time, and they prophesied also. Then went he also to Ramah, and came to a great well that is in Secu. And he asked and said, Where are Samuel and David? And one said, Behold, they be at Naioth in Ramah. And he went thither to Naioth and Ramah, and the Spirit of God was upon him also. And he went on and prophesied until he came to Naioth and Ramah, and he stripped off his clothes also, and prophesied before Samuel in like manner, and lay down naked all that day and all that night. Wherefore they say, Is Saul also among the prophets? So David is going to flee from Gibeah, and he's going to go to Ramah, which is up here. So he's gone north. And who does he go to? Samuel. Great choice, by the way. A man of God that obviously was well aware of the situation. Samuel knew Saul very well, and obviously knew God's plan for David, and so this is David's spiritual refuge. And I'm just going to tell you, it's obviously our number one spiritual refuge should be God, right? But I'm just going to tell you, it is nice if you don't have somebody that you can call on, reach out to, that you can count on to give spiritual advice in difficult situations. You really ought to find somebody, because it's very important. And so Saul sends these messengers to capture David, but guess what? They ain't getting him. Each group, and eventually Saul himself falls under the power of the Spirit of God, begins prophesying, and this protects David temporarily. However, guess what? It doesn't stop Saul's pursuit of continuing to pursue David. He's not done. He's not giving up. I have to laugh at verse number 24 that, at the end it says that, they say, is Saul also among the prophets? It was kind of confusing to them, I'm pretty sure. What's going on here? But again, just shows you that just as, and we see this is Old Testament and God protecting David using his power and his authority here. But I look at it, God hadn't changed from the Old Testament to the New Testament, right? Because he used some miraculous ways to get Jesus out of places and times where the people wanted him dead, right? Guess what? He didn't change from the Old Testament to the New Testament, and he ain't changed today either. He still can protect us and will protect us as he sees fit. And so from here we move over to chapter 21 and verse number 1. Then came David to Nob, to Ahimelech, the priest. And Ahimelech was afraid at the meeting of David, and said unto him, Why art thou alone, and no man with thee? And David said unto Ahimelech, the priest, The king hath commanded me a business, and hath said unto me, Let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee, and what I have commanded thee, and I have appointed my servant to such and such a place. And therefore, what is under thine hand, give me 5 loaves of bread in mine hand, or what there is present. And the priest answered David and said, There is no common bread under mine hand, but there is hallowed bread, if the young men have kept themselves at least from women. And David answered the priest and said unto him, Of a truth women have been kept from us about these 3 days since I came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy, and the bread is in a manner common, yea, though it were sanctified this day in the vessel. So the priest gave him hallowed bread. For there was no bread, but the showbread that was taken from before the Lord, to put hot bread in the day when it was taken away. And we just down to verse number 9. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg, an Edomite, the chiefest of the herdmen that belonged to Saul. And David said unto Ahimelech, And is there not here under thine hand spear or sword? For I have neither brought my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's business required haste. And the priest said, The sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom thou slewest in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here, wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If thou wilt take that, take it, for there is no other save that here. And David said, There is none like that, give it me. So David is going to, he's going to leave Ramah, and he is going to come to Nob, and we'll read just a little bit more in chapter 22. But let's see, you gotta find it. Yeah, right there above. Yep, right there. It all runs together after a little while. So he's coming back down south, and I find it interesting that so Nob is a city of priests, and so David comes and finds Ahimelech, and this is where it gets just a little bit gray for me. Maybe it wasn't for David. Maybe it's not for God and David. Any concerning things here? Well, I mean, yeah. But any concerning things that David does? I mean, he's the showbread, which is not, he's not supposed to do that. What else? Yeah, I'm here on the king's business. This is, it's kind of one of those things where if you look at it from David's standpoint, we can justify that, right? I'm scared for my life. I'm hungry. I'm on the run. Give me some bread, whatever you got, I'll take it. I don't care where it's from, what the significance of it is. I just need something to eat. And then I'm going to tell you that I'm here on the king's business, and even goes on to tell him that, I didn't bring any of my weapons with me because I had to make haste. Let's go ahead and jump over to 22 and read verses 11 through 19. By the way, y'all know I'm a vision person, but I kind of laugh whenever David asks Ahimelech about weapons, and he says, "I got Goliath's sword over here," and I'm sure that was not a little sword. So I kind of laugh whenever I envision David trying to lug that big old sword around with him. But I guess, hey, if you can get a swipe with that, you might take out more than you can with your hands, right? So chapter 22, verse 11. Then the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests that were in Nob, and they came all of them to the king. Saul said, Hear now, thou son of Ahitub. And he answered, Here I am, my lord. And Saul said unto him, Why have you conspired against me, thou and the son of Jesse, in that thou hast given him bread and a sword, and hast inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait, as at this day? Then Ahimelech answered the king and said, And who so faithful among all thy servants as David, which is the king's son-in-law, and goeth at thy bidding and is honorable in thine house? Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Be it far from me, let not the king impute anything unto his servant, nor to all the house of my father, for thy servant knew nothing of all this, less or more. And the king said, Thou shalt surely die, Ahimelech, thou and all thy father's house. And the king said unto the footmen that stood about him, Turn and slay the priest of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew when he fled and did not show it to me. But the servants of the king would not put forth their hand to fall upon the priest of the Lord. And the king said to Doeg, Turn thou and fall upon the priest. And Doeg the Edomite turned, and he fell upon the priest and slew on that day 75 persons that did wear a linen ephod. And Nob, the city of the priests, smote he with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and sucklings, and oxen and asses and sheep with the edge of the sword. So, obviously, again, going back and reading, we seen in chapter 21 that it mentioned that Doeg was there. And he's very close to Saul. And obviously he went and told Saul that David was there. And so they go and this is really a tragic point in David's journey, because after Saul discovers that the priest helped David, he orders the city to be destroyed. I think it has something to be said of the footmen that refused to lay hand on them. And I think it speaks volumes about them and their respect and their, honor to the Lord and his men. But from this, a man by the name of Abiathar would escape. He would join David, and he would bring spiritual and political implications for David. He would be very critical for David along this journey. And so, again, just to recap, we've gone from Gibeah to Ramah to Nob. And so Nob is a city of what? What's there? City of priests. We're going to go back to chapter 21, because those two from chapter 21, the situation where David comes to Nob and meets with Ahimelech, and the situation in chapter 22, they just connect together. So I wanted to bring those two situations and let you see the results of what happened there, because they found out that David had been there. And so we jump down to verse number 10 of chapter 21, and we'll read down through verse 15. And David arose and fled that day for fear of Saul, and went to Achish, the king of Gath. And the servant of Achish said unto him, Is not this David the king of the land? Did they not sing one to another of him in dances, saying, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s? And David laid up these words in his heart, and was sore afraid of Achish the king of Gath. And he changed his behavior before them, and feigned himself mad in their hands, and scrabbled on the doors of the gate, and let his spittle fall down upon his beard. Then said Achish unto his servants, Lo, you see the man is mad. Wherefore then have you brought him to me? Have I need of madmen, that you have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house? So they're going to Gath. Gath is over here. So he's gone from here all the way over to Gath. And he comes and they bring him into Achish presence. And what is anything specific about Gath? Do you know anything about Gath? City of Goliath. It's Philistine territory. This is, I'll be honest with you, no idea what David's thinking here. He might be going a little bit crazy from being scared. I don't know. When you look at it, nothing about it makes sense for him to go there. But it's really a dangerous move because they obviously know who he is. When they find him, they identify him. You don't kill the most important soldier in their army single-handedly with a rock and a sling and be forgotten by him. Right? So they know who he is. They know his... I find it interesting that they are even aware of the celebration and the praise that David got back home. These are Philistines. Sometimes I read things and I'm thinking, how in the world, in today's society, it's nothing for people over, there were, I remember, I guess it was last school year, they all started running together. When we had, there was obviously the shooting in North Georgia at the school, and then obviously things happened here, and listen, there were people that I knew in states out west that were hearing about things going on in Tifton. And while that still amazes me, it's not completely surprising because of social media, right? Social media and news covers everything. If you have WAOB on social media, everything you get's from some other state except for here. Anyway, that's my one dig at them for tonight. But so when I read that, and I was thinking, now how in the world do the Philistines know about that? They did. There was no question in that. And so here, David, he's afraid of Achish, who is the king, and to avoid being killed, what does David do? He acts like he's crazy. He put on the whole shebang, and Achish dismisses him, and to escape. And I think when you read this, you have to understand David's vulnerability. Right? He's by himself. But he's not by himself. He's got the greatest protector that he could ever have. And so, even though he's vulnerable, God's protection is extending beyond just protecting him from Saul. He's going to protect him from Israel's enemies as well. Again, I wish I could understand, and I can't. I don't know. Maybe you know more. Maybe there's something out there. I didn't really dive into it a ton because I didn't want to allow it to consume. But what made David go to Gath? I don't know. It's an odd situation. But I guess, listen, when you're scared and you're running, maybe he just struck out and thought, I'm going to get it. If there's anywhere he's not going to look for me, guess where it's going to be? It's not going to be in Philistine territory. So maybe that's the rationale behind it. But not sure I would have went there because I'd have been afraid of being killed there too. So I guess it's, it's a lose-lose situation, I guess, if you look at it that way. So we go over to chapter 22, verse number 1. David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave Adullam. And when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. And everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was discontented, gathered themselves unto him, and he became a captain over them, and there were with him about 400 men. Now, let me just tell you something. If that don't sound like the group of people you want to be the captain over, I don't know what does. I say that with all sarcasm. They are discontented people. They're in debt. This is just, this ain't the who's who's, right? Yeah. So so he's going to go and he's going to come back to the east just a little bit. And he's going to come to Adullam. And so remind you, this is where Bethlehem is where David's from. That's where Jesse and all of his family, his dad, that's where all of them are from. And so they hear that again, somehow they get word. Man. They get word that David is in Adullam. This is there's a massive cave system there. And I wish I'd have been able to find pictures at Adullam that would serve as a natural fortress for David. And so this is David's first stronghold. He's kind of just been running at this point, but he's now here in the Judean wilderness, and he's got this natural fortress. His family's going to come join him, and so are 400 distressed and discontented men who become his loyal followers. This place marks the beginning of David's transformation into a leader. And understand this, that he's going to be shaped into a leader through hardship, community, and dependence on God. And so, we see this, and so we, I don't want to say we question why God would let David, but understand that through all of this, through all this hardship, God is building David up to be the man that he wants him to be the leader that he wants him to be. And so, we have to understand that all of our, as long as it's not a trial that's brought on by our own, which it still should be a learning time for us, but everything that we go through, really whether good or bad, should draw us closer to the Lord. It should make us more like Him. It should create us into, again, what He wants us to be. And if we'll let Him, that's what He'll do. I'm sure David has no idea that God is using this to prepare him. I can't imagine. I could be wrong because I don't know David's heart and I don't know David's thoughts. But I can tell you my first reaction would not be, oh yeah, God's just using this to get me ready. No, there's going to be some nights where me and God are going to have some long talks, and I'm going to say, now why in the world am I having to deal with this? What is this for? And then, not only, listen, think about the people that he's leading now. He's just inherited 400 men that are distressed and discontented. So if that's not hard enough to lead them, guess what else he's got? His family. Oh boy. You want to talk about, listen, some of the hardest people to lead. Sometimes your own family. And I ain't talking about, Heidi and the kids in here, I ain't talking about them. Talking about your brothers, your siblings, your mom, dad, your husband. That's just, I don't have one of those, so I don't know nothing about that. I'm not saying wife, because mine's probably watching, and I'll be in trouble when I get home. But think about it. So he's just inherited one of the hardest groups of people to have to lead. But I tell you what, it's probably a whole lot better, because, listen, you got 400 distressed and discontented men here. You go back to Israel and think about how many folks you're going to be leading there. That number easily could double with the amount of people in Israel. And imagine if half of them are discontented. Imagine if a third of them become distressed and discontented. And it's bound to happen. Somebody's not going to be happy with you. And so, David's bringing this in, and so God is shaping him through this. But this is his very first stronghold. They did. They chose David. And I think that says something too, that I believe God sent them to David. 100%. Because the reality is, David probably would not have chosen them. If it was up to David, David probably would have said, listen, y'all, I got enough of my own problems right now. Y'all just go on back to Bethlehem and deal with it. Let me deal with mine. But I believe God sent them to David. And so David's not, again, understand, David's not in a bad place. I don't think David's in a bad place spiritually at this point. I think he's scared. I think he's worried. I think he's maybe even questioning God some. But guess what? Nothing wrong with questioning God. It's okay. He can handle that, right? You just have to be obedient, regardless of what answer he gives you, regardless of his response to you. And so, from here we jump over to chapter 23. So we know that sometime during this time, while David is at the cave, Adullam cave, that's when Saul calls in the priest and destroys Nob during that time. And then we come to chapter 23. And we pick up in verse number 1. Then they told David, saying, behold, the Philistines fight against Keilah, and they rob the threshing floors. Therefore David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I go and smite these Philistines? And the Lord said unto David, go and smite the Philistines, and save Keilah. And David's men said unto him, behold, we be afraid here in Judah. How much more then if we come to Keilah against the armies of the Philistines? Then David inquired of the Lord yet again, and the Lord answered him and said, arise, go down to Keilah, for I will deliver the Philistines into thine hand. So David and his men went to Keilah and fought with the Philistines and brought away their cattle and smote them with a great slaughter. So David saved the inhabitants of Keilah. And it came to pass when Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, fled to David to Keilah, that he came down with an ephod in his hand. And it was told Saul that David was come to Keilah, and Saul said, God hath delivered him into mine hand, for he shut in by entering into a town that hath gates and bars. And Saul called all the people together to war, to go down to Keilah to besiege David and his men. And David knew that Saul secretly practiced mischief against him, and he said to Abiathar, the priest, bring hither the ephod. Then said David, O Lord God of Israel, thy servant has certainly heard that Saul seeketh to come to Keilah to destroy the city for my sake. Will the men of Keilah deliver me up into his hand? Will Saul come down as thy servant hath heard? O Lord God of Israel, I beseech thee, tell thy servant. And the Lord said, he'll come down. And then said David, will the men of Keilah deliver me and my men into the hand of Saul? And the Lord said, they'll deliver thee up. Then David and his men, which were about 600, arose and departed out of Keilah and went whithersoever they could go. And it was told Saul that David was escaped from Keilah, and he forbare to go forth. So David, so his stronghold here in Adullam, he hears about the Philistines coming into Keilah and robbing the threshing floor, obviously taking food away, goods away from the Israelites. And, here we go again with, here's folks hiding out in a cave, trying to stay hidden, right? That's if I'm hiding, I don't want anybody to know where I'm at, right? Especially if I'm hiding in fear for my life. But obviously somebody knows where they are to be able to get word back to them that the Philistines are attacking. The Philistines are robbing. And so David inquired of the Lord. You want me to go? The Lord said, yeah, I want you to go. He said, go. I laugh at the response of his men. They said, we're here and we're afraid. You want us to go there? How much more afraid are we going to be there? That's crazy. And, so David goes to the Lord again. Lord, do you want me to go? The Lord said, yes, David, I want you to go. And so David goes. And interesting to me that obviously they slew the Philistines. But there was a dirty, rotten scoundrel in there somewhere that had the gall, after David and his men came in and saved them and beat the Philistines, to go and tell Saul that David is in Keilah. Now, listen, I don't know the timeline of all those details, of all those, how many days, weeks, months was he in Keilah. I don't know any of that. I don't have that here. However, really it's not given to us. But these folks don't waste no time getting word out to places. They faster than some of these folks today with Facebook, right? I mean, they are fast. Because Saul now knows that David's in Keilah. And what's his response to that? I got him. Can I say he's pretty bold to say the Lord has delivered me into his hands, or has delivered him into my hands. And then you can't help, y'all, if you can't read your Bible and laugh sometimes, and, listen, sometimes you cry, sometimes you laugh, sometimes I get mad. When I read my Bible, it's full of emotion. But I honestly, I laughed whenever David said, Lord, Saul is planning to come get me. Is he going to come down? The Lord said, yep, sure is. Then David said, Lord, are they going to give me into his hand? Are they going to give me up? Are they going to turn me over? The Lord said, yep. I just have to laugh because it's like, well, can you stop that? Can you prevent that, please? Right. Can you do me a favor? Right. Can you put a roadblock out there somewhere or something? But David, obviously God gave David that information, so David knew, guess what? You need to get out of here. And so this is, we've seen David being prepared into a leader. We see him leading these men into a battle through, and again, commend David, because before he went to battle, who did he consult? He consulted God. You want me to go? Yes. Okay. But even in the midst of the victory, we still see David's reliance on the Lord and his guidance and the ongoing danger from Saul, even in those moments of victory. You still have to, and I think if we understand anything about that we're so quick to, whenever we experience a spiritual victory, let's look at it from a spiritual standpoint. When we experience spiritual victory in our lives and we weather a storm, we tend to let our guard down once we get through that storm, don't we? We tend to just kind of want to take it in. Let me just tell you something. You better always keep your guard up. You can enjoy the victory. I believe the Lord wants us to enjoy the victory. But you better keep your guard up, because Satan's not going to lay down. He's not going to give up. He's going to keep pressing. He's going to keep pushing. He's going to keep trying to get to you. And so David here rescues a besieged city in Keilah. And we move down to verses in 1 Samuel 23 to chapter 23, verse 14. And David abode in the wilderness in strongholds, and remained in a mountain in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul sought him every day, but God delivered him not into his hand. And David saw that Saul was come out to seek his life, and David was in the wilderness of Ziph in a wood. And Jonathan, Saul's son, arose and went to David in the wood, and strengthened his hand in God. He said to him, Fear not, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find thee, and thou shalt be a king over Israel, and I shall be next unto thee, and that also Saul my father knoweth. And they two made a covenant before the Lord, and David abode in the wood, and Jonathan went to his house. Then came up the Ziphites to Saul to Gibeah, saying, Doth not David hide himself with us in strongholds in the wood, in the hill of Hachilah, which is on the south of Jeshimon? Now therefore, O king, come down according to all the desire of thy soul to come down, and our part shall be to deliver him into the king's hand. And Saul said, Blessed be ye of the Lord, for you have compassion on me. Go, I pray you, prepare yet, and know and see his place where his haunt is, and who hath seen him there, for it is told me that he dealeth very subtly. See therefore, and take knowledge of all the lurking places where he hideth himself, and come ye again to me with the certainty, and I will go with you, and it shall come to pass, if he be in the land, that I will search him out throughout all the thousands of Judah. And they arose and went to Ziph before Saul, but David and his men were in the wilderness of Maon, in the plain, and on the south of Jeshimon. And so here they're in the wilderness of David has left. He's gone to the wilderness of Ziph and Maon, and that is, I think right here. He's right in between, and these are little things on here, but he's right in this area somewhere in between those two in the wilderness. They're hiding, and David spent an extended amount of time in rugged wilderness. I don't know if you remember, and we'll get there in just a little bit. I showed you pictures of En-Gedi, which is where some of the caves are, and we'll get there, like I said, in a little bit. But David, a lot of the terrain that he was in was rugged, and it was rough, and a lot of steep hills, a lot of hidden ravines, and so it provided obviously natural shelter. But now, that's a lot of men to be trying to hide, right? You've now got a crew with you, and so Saul comes to Ziph, And the Ziphites betrayed David's location to Saul on multiple occasions. But God repeatedly protected him. In one dramatic moment in Maon, Saul nearly surrounded David. But a Philistine attack forced Saul to withdraw at the last second. And so God's providence through, God can use anything, right? I mean, in that case, he used geography, he used timing, he used every bit of that to help David escape the hand of Saul in that situation. And so we move on to chapter 24. And this is a long reading. I'm not going to read all of it, but verses 1 through 22 is En Gedi. This is the caves of En Gedi, and I don't know if it's on this one or, yeah, it's on this one. So En Gedi is here. So remember, it's right near the Dead Sea. You have Masada here. I don't know that I buy any of that there about David maybe hiding out there. But I do know that Masada is here regardless, and we do know for a fact that he spent time in En Gedi. Again, a very rocky place with caves and cliffs that overlook the Dead Sea. This is a decisive moment in David's moral leadership, because while David is hiding in a cave, he encounters Saul. He's alone. Saul's vulnerable. Instead of killing him, what did David do? Cut off a part of his robe. Mind you, going all the way back, what did I tell you at the beginning? And what did we read in the beginning? David handled himself wisely. David meant no harm to Saul. Again, David didn't choose this position. God chose this position for David. And so I think, to me, you would think that would have ended it for Saul. I mean, the man had me, right? I mean, he was close enough. He cut a piece of my robe off. You know what that means? It means he very easily could have killed him. But David chose not to. He demonstrated, still demonstrating his loyalty to Saul. Still demonstrating the fact that he's not out to kill anybody. David's trying to save his own life, and this marks a turning point, because David's not going to take the throne by violence. What kind of picture would that set? Right? What kind of image does that give the people? Some of them would like it, because some of them hated Saul. But from a spiritual standpoint, from a godly standpoint, it would have been one of the worst things David could have ever done. To take the throne by force and violence. Instead, David wanted Saul to know, I had you, but I'm not doing that. That's not what I'm about. That's not. Instead, David is simply doing this. David is trusting God to establish him as king of Israel in God's time. God obviously has already been working on this. God was working on this. He knew this was going to happen regardless. But God was working on this before David even knew that he was chosen to be the king to succeed Saul. Chapter 27. almost done, I promise. Chapter 27, verse number 1. David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. It's nothing better for me than that I should speedily escape into the land of the Philistines, and Saul shall despair of me to seek me any more in any coast of Israel, so shall I escape out of his hand. And David arose, and he passed over with the 600 men that were with him unto Achish, the son of Maoch, king of Gath. And David dwelt with Achish at Gath, and he and his men, every man with his household, even David with his 2 wives, Ahinoam and Jezreelitis, and Abigail, the Carmelitess, Nabal's wife. And it was told Saul that David was fled to Gath, and he sought no more again for him. And David said unto Achish, If I have now found grace in thine eyes, let them give me a place in some town in the country, that I may dwell there, for why should thy servant dwell in the royal city with thee? And then Achish gave him Ziklag that day, wherefore Ziklag pertaineth unto the kings of Judah unto this day. And the time that David dwelt in the country of the Philistines, there was a full year and 4 months. And so David's going to go back to Gath, right? So he's leaving this area, and he's going all the way back over here. And if you go to the next slide, is that that's the next one? Well, so Ziklag is down here. I thought they had it on there, but they did. David's tired. He's constantly fleeing from danger, and so he goes back to Achish, the king of Gath, and he gives him Ziklag. And he stays here for 16 months, uses the city as a base while continuing to conduct raids against the enemy. And when Ziklag is burned down by the Amalekites, David's men nearly turned on him. David strengthened himself. It's one of my favorite verses of David. After they come back, they find that Ziklag has been just totally destroyed, everything taken, everybody killed. David and his men come back, and they blame David for it. Mind you, David's family was in the same situation as his men's. David was not at home when it happened. David was with them fighting. And yet they blame David. But in that moment, obviously, listen, David's been fleeing from Saul. He's been running for his life. He's been trying to lead these people. He's been trying to take care of them. Obviously, he's even fought to protect other places that really he could have just let go, but trying to be obedient to the Lord. And so David's at a point, he's tired of fleeing, so he goes to this place to hide, to get away, and is set up there. And then they come back, and now all of his men are turning against him. That's a bad place to be. But I love it because the Bible says that David encouraged himself in the Lord. David didn't let it get him. David went and he encouraged himself in the Lord. Listen, sometimes that's all you got, right? Sometimes there ain't nobody else on your side. Sometimes everybody else, if nothing else, they may seem or appear to be against you. There's no doubt in my mind that maybe there's a handful of guys in that group that they don't want to blame David. But if the majority is going to blame David, they're certainly not going to stand against them. So they join in. They become part of the problem. And so David goes and he encourages himself in the Lord. And in fact, you can go on to chapter 29 and chapter 30 and read more about that whole situation. But David, and something else. So he encouraged himself in the Lord. But to me, one of the greatest things, and I think it's because he encouraged himself in the Lord, he didn't allow that to cause him to quit. He didn't give up. He kept going. He kept pushing, and David would go on, and he would pursue the enemy. He wasn't going to give up. He wasn't going to lay down. He was going to go, and he recovered everything that was taken. I think Ziklag serves as a little bit of a symbolic moment of David's leadership under pressure, also deepening his dependence on the Lord. Then we go to chapter 31. And by the way, isn't it interesting that whenever David went to the Philistine country that Saul said, I'm done. I'm not going to pursue him anymore. Verse number 1 of chapter 31. Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons. The Philistines slew Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, Saul's sons. And the battle went sore against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was sore wounded of the archers. Then said Saul unto his armor-bearer, Draw thy sword, and thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and abuse me. But his armor-bearer would not, for he is sore afraid. Then Saul took a sword and fell upon it. And when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he fell likewise upon his sword and died with him. So Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor-bearer, and all his men that same day together. And so, is it on here? I don't see Gilboa on here. Anyway, so David would stay in Ziklag, but Mount Gilboa is the place of Saul's final battle and death, and obviously he while he didn't directly die at the hand of the Philistines, they certainly played a role. I also find it interesting, maybe you do too, maybe you don't, that this comes after Saul decided, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not chasing him. I'm not going to chase him anymore. But because Saul died and all of his sons, that's one of the things that is always interesting, because, the heir to the throne, right, would have been one of his sons. And so that would have left open the door for controversy and issues, and God just let it go ahead and take care of all of it. And so Saul and his sons, including, unfortunately, Jonathan, who was a friend of David. And so this would clear the way for David's kingship, but also marks a sobering end to Saul's incomplete obedience and fractured reign as king. And obviously there's so many pieces in between, and we just looked at David's fleeing from Saul and where he went. But there's a lot of problems that took place and that Saul had, that you can go and read about that sometime. But anyway, imagine, just think about that. Just even if it was 7 years, continually fleeing and running for your life. There's no way to live, but God had his back, didn't he? Anybody have any thoughts, comments, questions tonight?